On behalf of the Local Government Network, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar where we're recapping 3 of the papers from the Australian Road Safety Conference in Hobart last year. So thank you very much to our 3 presenters for reprising your presentations for us. For those that don't know me, my name is Mel Suter. I'm the chair of the network and I'm the Road Safety Officer for Parks, Forbes and Lachlan Shire Councils in New South Wales during my day job. So yes, if we go to the next slide, thanks Kathy. We'll do the housekeeping. So we would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the many First Nations of Australia who continue to be the sovereign custodians of their countries and the sovereignty of the Maori in New Zealand. We acknowledge the ongoing traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, work and learn, and pay our respects to elders who have passed on the legacy of knowledge and cultures to the future generations. May the sharing of knowledge through Matarunga Maori and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of knowing, being and doing guide you with wisdom and courage as it enhances our collective futures. Next slide. So I just wanted to take a moment, if this is your very first LGN meeting, to say thank you and welcome aboard, just to remind you, I guess, about what we're all about. So we're members of the Australasian College for Road Safety who look at local government, who look at road safety through a local government lens. So the majority of our members work for local government, or they work for organisations that have an interest in what local government's doing in the road safety space. So they might be state road authorities, consultants, etc. So the network, we're very active. We have a meeting every month at this time, the second Wednesday at 2 o'clock Australian Eastern Time, and a whole lot of different formats. Sometimes it's a webinar like this, sometimes like next month. It will be an open mic session where you can ask the Brains Trust for help on an issue that you might be having. But it's really that opportunity to connect with people and with ideas that you might not encounter in your day-to-day lives. That's what the network offers. So in terms of housekeeping, we're going to run for 60 minutes. We do have 3 presenters, and apologies, Stuart's not there, you can see that. They've just had a fire drill in Hobart, so hopefully he'll be back shortly to reprise his presentation at the end of the webinar. It is being recorded and you will get a link to the recording at the end of the webinar. We are going to hold questions until the end, and if you do want to ask a question, so use the Q&A bit at the bottom. If you're new to Zoom, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. We have enabled the upvoting, so if you really like a question, you can upvote it, so it'll be at the top of the list. I will do my best to get through all of our questions before our time is up this afternoon, but if I don't get to yours and you'd really like to ask it, the presenters are going to pop their email addresses into the chat after they finish chatting, so please feel free to catch them up with them offline. And feel free to use the chat if you just want to have a general discussion about the topics that we're chatting about today. So that's it from the housekeeping side of stuff. Let's get into the official bit. So welcome to our 3 presenters and thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. So first up, we're going to hear from Kathy from Safe System Solution, who is the training manager, talking to us about a skills roadmapper. I hope I got that right. Then we'll hear from David from Main Roads WA, talking about speed limits. And finally, Stuart, hopefully, will be back from his fire drill from the City of Hobart to talk us through their transport plan. Next slide, thanks. So Kathy Ducris, as I said, is the training manager at Safe System Solutions. So she's our first presenter. Kathy, I'll hand over to you.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Mel, and thanks for making the opportunity to come and do this presentation today. So I'll be presenting on what's called the Safe System Skills Roadmapper. So it's an easy-to-use tool to help local government practitioners and generally any practitioners working in the road safety space to help with deciding on the professional development that they're looking to do when it comes to developing up their road safety skills. So we'll run through this presentation. It'll run through what the background was to developing of the tool, what's been included, and then a little demo of how it works. So it is called the Safe System Skills Roadmapper. You get direction and a roadmap on your professional development journey. No puns intended. What I'll do is just pop the link to it in the chat. No, I won't. I'll pop the link in the chat shortly, is what I'll do. So the background, the background to this particular tool is that we've had some challenges in embedding the safe system principles. And one of the challenges is the limited capability development amongst practitioners. So a number of reviews and research points to this being an issue across government agencies. And I know from a personal perspective, in my organisation, we organise technical training for practitioners, and often we're hearing from people who are looking for guidance about what's the best thing for them to do, where they're at in their particular career at their stage, and also what's best for their teams or what's best for the road agency. So if you're new to road safety, you don't know what you don't know. And also, if you've been around for a little while, sometimes you may find it difficult to know what's next for you in terms of your professional development in the space. So in Victoria, the TARSC is investing in a safe local roads and streets program. And in preparation for this, capability and capacity building has been a priority. So what we did was we collaborated with the TARSC to develop the tool through identification of all the aspects that go towards, I guess, what you would call safe system capability. So we broke this down into two sections. So you've got the knowledge section, which is basically information, facts, understanding, familiarity, and awareness of the safe system. And then you've got the skills section, which is the specific tasks and the ability to carry out those tasks in a proficient manner. So I guess in essence, it's the application of the knowledge. So this tool includes both activities to help increase knowledge, and then also activities to help apply or give you an opportunity to practice that knowledge. We also recognise that people learn in a myriad of different ways. There's many different opportunities and many methods to learn, and some of that comes down to what your preferences might be, what opportunities you have available to you, your access levels, and so on. And so part of this tool that has been fed into it as well. The other data that you input is what your role is. So what do you currently do? And there's quite a long list of different roles developed in there. And also whether or not you're in a leadership role and you lead others. Then from there, you've got your learning styles. So all the different ways you can learn. And then the existing skills and knowledge. So this section, you self-rate what your existing skills or knowledge is in these different areas. And each of these can be broken down into more detailed, or you can just do an overview section. So we'll demonstrate it, which is probably the best way to see how it learns. And then, so once you've inputted all the data, then at the end, you're presented with your personalised professional development plan. Now, it lists the top 10 activities you can undertake that are based on your inputs, and then it also gives you a bit of a bonus list of some other activities that you could consider. What we've put is about 150 different activities has been fed into the tool or into the machine, and they come with an Australian, New Zealand focus. And I think just the sheer number of activities goes to show that we're not necessarily lacking of information and resources and activities. Perhaps it's just knowing where to find them and what's needed at what time for different people in their career trajectory. All right, so we'll do a live demonstration. So bear with me as I think you're seeing it now. Is that right, Mel?
Yep, we can see it.
Terrific. Okay. So let's see if I can make that a bit bigger. out. That's okay. Let's go over here. So Mel, you've agreed to be my guinea pig for this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So here we go. Now I can probably put this into the chat for everyone. I can see some applause, so that's great. I'm not sure who they're applauding there, but that's all right. Everyone. So there it is there, but he will run through basically, and we'll use Mel as our sample person. So you go to this website and you click get started, and the first question is, what is your role? So Mel, from this long list of roles, what would
I was the one at the top. I'm a road safety officer.
Absolutely. It's like it's made for you. Do you lead a team or teams of people?
No.
Great. So far, so good. Now here you get to say what your preferred learning styles are, and you can go up and down the scale, and it's lovely in this traffic color mode. So you can tell us how much you hate or love these different areas. So we'll start with formal training courses, and there's a little description there of what they involve. Can you tell us, do you love them or hate them, or somewhere in the middle?
I probably am like 75%.
Yeah, like the percentage. Great. On the job learning, practical experiences.
Oh yeah, I'm like 100%. I love that.
100%. Hard green. E-learning.
Oh no, I'm down the bottom end. I don't love that.
Terrific. Self-directed learning.
Yeah, probably in the middle.
Right. Professional certifications.
Probably in the middle.
Okay. Conference and events.
Love them.
Yeah, figured you would. Networking and peer learning.
Yeah, and I love that too.
Because this is like an example of that, isn't it? Great. Okay, good. So we'll hit next. Now, this is that section on skills and knowledge where I was saying you can get quite detailed with it. So there's a little drop down or side arrow business going on there. And so you can actually see, so when it says general safe system, what is this? What's involved in general safe system, and you can actually rate each of those individually, or you can just do at a higher level in general. So I think we'll just do higher level for this example. Is that all right, Mel?
Oh, yep.
Oh, or did you have plans for more in depth? Did you?
Oh no, I'm okay with the high level. Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So this is where you're telling us what your self-rated level of skill or knowledge is in the following areas. So you might go from 0 to expert, basically.
I reckon I'm halfway. Yep.
Halfway. Okay, great. Safe system infrastructure. Just to give you a guide on sort of what's involved in there.
Oh, probably about halfway.
Okay. Next one, safe system speeds.
Yeah, about halfway. Yep.
Straight down the middle, safe system planning.
Oh, I'm probably a bit less than half for that. Yep.
About there.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, safe system design.
Yep, probably halfway. Yep.
Safe system delivery.
Oh, yeah, probably halfway. Yep.
And safe system evaluation.
Probably the same as planning.
Nice. And that's as hard as it gets, everybody. So once you've done that, you generate your CPD plan, and voila, your plan comes up. So here's listed your top 10 activities that you can do. Look at that. You can attend the Australian Road Safety Conference if you'd like, Mel. And then those other activities that I mentioned as well. So there might be some things a little bit maybe outside the box, or other things that you might not have considered, or some of them might come up a few times because they're right up your alley. And so that's it there. And then if you download that, hopefully this goes to the right screen, but otherwise I've got one that I prepared earlier. So it details it there with today's date, There's a little disclaimer there that says, you know, this has been based on the data that you've provided, and this is an early version of the tool, including its logic and output. So we are looking basically for people to utilise it at this stage and provide us feedback. So there's your plan, Mel, if you'd like to have a look at that. Now, I'll just jump back to the presentation. Are we on the right slide there? Almost. Sorry, just one moment. And that's just a QR code to take you to the planner as well. So some further enhancements we're still doing is to include a feedback option for people to give us some feedback on the tool. So as mentioned, it is an early version or a beta testing phase. So we'd love for people to be able to use it and give us some feedback. And the other improvement is that we're looking to pop in some web links so that you've got, you know, once you've got your plan there, you can click straight onto each item, and it'll take you to further information about each of those different activities that have been listed there for you. So that's some things that we've got in the pipeworks. The website itself, you know, it could look snazzier, but it's more about the content than about the look of it. So please, at this stage, feel free to share it with your colleagues, use it and give us some feedback. And there's, so yeah, some of you were hoping to see Kenn today, but there's a picture of him. That's as much as you're going to get. And so you can, yeah, contact Kenn, contact myself, and we'll keep refining the tool and sharing it. So that's all from me. Thank you again, Mel, and thanks to everyone for your attention.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. And I just remind you, if you wanted to ask a question, please, yeah, whack it into the Q&A. I can see there's a question there in the chat that we can get to as well. And Kathy will pop her contact details also into the chat so that you can chat to her offline if you want to. So thank you. Let's move on to our next presenter. So welcome to David Moises from Main Roads WA, who is the road safety manager over there. And today David's going to be talking about setting speed limits. So David, we've had a lot of chats about speed limits last year at the network, so I'm sure this will be very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, just we'll start with the first slide. So yeah, this was a presentation I did in Hobart last year. It was around picking up the pace for road safety in WA and how we can sort of maximise the return on investment in terms of saving of lives on the road network. Okay, thanks. So we did some comparative performance and looked at the analysis of how WA is performing with the other states. And when you broke it down into metropolitan and regional areas, in the metro areas, WA is doing comparatively well, sitting just under 3 deaths per population, which is in line with the other states of Australia. But when you look at the regional part of the state, thanks, Kathy, you can see that we're on par with Northern Territory, but almost double, double of some of the states, but the majority of the states in Australia. And that got us thinking about why is that the case. And when we looked at it, both Western Australia and the Northern Territory, thanks Kathy, share a default speed limit of 110 kilometres an hour, where all the other states have a default limit of 100, and Tasmania also has a separate default limit for gravel roads being 80 kilometres an hour. So we did a bit of research into that, and that's where this presentation sort of kicked off from. Thanks, Kathy. So how did we end up with 110 in WA? Well, prior to 1967, there was no open maximum default limit specified. Drivers just drove to the conditions of the environment. And in 1967, Australia introduced the maximum open speed limit of 65 miles per hour, which was equivalent to 104 kilometres an hour. In WA, this resulted in an 8.8% increase in fatality rate the very next year. In 1974, metrification came into effect, which saw the 65 miles per hour or 104 kilometres an hour rounded up to 110 in WA. Other states rounded it down to 100. That then caused the fatalities in WA to climb to an all-time high average of 307 deaths per annum, an increase of 19% over 7 years. Thanks, Kathy. So what does it mean in WA? All of these WA roads that you see here, legally you can drive at 110 kilometres an hour. The two on the left are default roads and haven't been formally speed zoned, and the one on the right is probably the only one that's safe to travel at 110 with good clear zones and reasonable seal widths, etc. So a bit of context in the background of the network in WA. There's 185,000 kilometres of network. Of that, nearly 19,000 kilometres are controlled by the State Road Authority and 128,000 kilometres are controlled by local government. 132,000 kilometres of that network are unzoned roads. So those are roads that are subject to that default 110 kilometres an hour, and 96% of those are unsealed. It's estimated that it would cost about $149 billion to build that network up to a minimum standard that would be required for speed zoning, and a lot more money if we wanted it to be safe at 110. Thanks, Kathy. So we looked at the crashes on that 110 kilometre hour network across the state. On the highways and main roads, we were about 176 fatal and serious injuries per annum. On the local government network is 122 FSIs per annum. And when we looked at the default 110 kilometre hour roads, which is a subset of the two above, there's 110 deaths and serious injuries, occurring on that default network every year. And of that, which is a subset, 45 of those are on unsealed roads. Thanks, Kathy. We used Nielsen's power model to estimate the reduction that we could see in FSIs if we applied different speed zones to the network. The one of interest here was the all default roads of 110. If we'd load that to 100 kilometres an hour, we could expect to save 19 FSIs per annum. Now, this is based on an mean average reduction in actual travelling speed of around 3 kilometres an hour. So we're not expecting a full 10 kilometre hour reduction. You may get closer to that if there was a lot of enforcement on that network. But through research and studies, we know that we could achieve around 3 kilometres an hour with some education and information around a change in the road traffic code. Additionally so we just go back, sorry, Kathy, just one slide. Additionally to that, we could also save an additional 13 FSIs per annum because there's some low standard roads that are speed zoned to 110 that probably aren't appropriate to 110, that we would actually post down to 100 if we brought in a new default limit. And the reason we wouldn't do that prior is we wouldn't want to shift traffic off a safer sealed road onto a gravel road for sake, where it's less safe because people can travel faster. So we'd need to get the default road limit down first. Thanks. So the opportunity would be that we could save 160 people from harmful crashes by 2030. That is over a 5-year period. That's taking into account if we actually reduced both the default limit and those low standard sealed roads. So the biggest problem we have, I guess, is public perception and government perceptions around travel times and people wanting and not affect their journey times. So we did some analysis on that, and we basically looked at all towns with a population of over 1,000 people. That makes up 91% of the population in WA. And we used Google Maps to assign the most direct route between all of those towns. So there's 52 towns on either axis of that chart that you can see. everywhere that there's a dot or a dash, the travel journey times between those two towns would not change because there's high standard speed zoned roads joining those towns. We used a mathematical calculation to determine what difference in travel time there would be where there is a default limit joining some of those towns, or a portion of the trip would be on a default limit, and ascertained that on average it'd be between half a minute and 2 minutes in total time that would be increased to the journey times. The largest time difference would be 13 minutes between two townships, but 98% of the journeys wouldn't be affected in WA at all. And that's the mathematical calculation. And if you take into account the fact that you come up against traffic, you may have to slow down and wait for an overtaking opportunity. In the real world, those time differences in travel are likely to be halved. This chart, shows the population of WA and where people live. So the majority, 98% of people live in the southwest corner of the state. The rest is only 2% of the whole state. And you can see on the right-hand side, the journey time that increased by 13 minutes is between the towns of Dongara, which is a fishing village and retirement area, to the Goldfields or Kalgoorlie Boulder, where it's a mining district, and not many people would be making that journey. And if you take into consideration that the journey currently takes around 8 hours, 45 minutes, a 13-minute increase in that journey time for anyone doing that trip is not a big percentage increase over that total time between those two townships. So who would be affected by a change to the default limit? Well, when you take into consideration trucks, buses and vehicles towing trailers are not affected by a change to a default limit because they're already regulated under the Road Traffic Code and the vehicle regulations to 100 kilometres an hour max. And some trucking companies are operating at 90 kilometres an hour as well. And considering that 25% of all trips of the vehicle kilometres travelled are in that category of 100 kilometres an hour, and also take into account the density of the population and where people live and the proximity to high standard, high speed roads, it's estimated that 95% of the WA population would not regularly be affected. And this is important when it comes to telling the story to communities and getting the messages through to politicians that, you know, they're unlikely to lose a lot of votes by making a decision on the default speed limit, and the potential to save 160 FSIs over a 5-year period is compelling. Thanks. That's in my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. I'm sure that you'll have lots of questions, and we'll just get you to pop your email address into the chat, and so people can have a chat to you offline if they'd like, if they're a bit shy and they'd prefer to do that. So thank you. Let's move on. Our final presenter did make it back from the fire alarm emergency. Stuart, I did see you pop in. Yes, there you are. Excellent. I'm glad you're back. That's never happened in all the time we've been doing webinars. So welcome to Stuart Baird, who's the Senior Transport Engineer at the City of Hobart Council, who is going to be talking us through their transport plans. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, apologies for the running away, but I'm back. Fire averted. So as everybody might be aware, the Road Safety Conference was held down here in Hobart last year. And of course, one of the great things when you're the host city is you get a chance to just put something up. And next slide, please. We definitely wondered about what we would put up. We'd done some work in this sort of air pollution space, and just seeing how many people air pollution from vehicle transport causes is pretty horrendous. But next slide, please. We just wondered more locally, you know, the work we'd done around speed limits and lessons from COVID might be of more interest to Australian practitioners, and how we tried to bring that about. Then we thought, oh, maybe it's more about, you know, maybe it's more about cycling plans and pedestrianisation of areas and what you can do on rural road to boost safety for cyclists in sort of out of the way areas that often get forgotten about. Next slide, please. And then we thought, oh, the really wonderful stuff in the road safety space is often much more interesting when we talk about children and what we can do for the future, and some of our school access travel plans, and the work we've been doing there. But of course, I went away for a couple of months as a volunteer caretaker to this amazing place, the Deal Island Kent Group National Park. And if anybody ever wants the most fabulous holiday of their lives, get in touch with the National Park Service in Tasmania, and you can become caretaker of any number of islands and have to look after these places and their various infrastructure, like their lighthouses, for months at a time. And of course, while you go and do that, the managers take over, and they decided they would like to see us put a presentation together on a completely different topic. So next slide, please. So I'll just take you through where we're at. In Hobart, we have a pretty standard city with an old Pack Point Associates transport plan from the 1960s, with highways running right through the centre of the city. And of course, once you've got those highways, urban arterials, a retail core, a whole range of waterfront operations, you end up with, you know, quite a dense agglomeration of contested wants and needs for the transport network. And what complicates it more for us, I suppose, is the state authority having taken over some of our main arterials as part of that interstate highway network only a few years ago, and being responsible for traffic signal operation. We really had no operational framework for managing the state highways and the council roads and their interactions through the city. Next slide, please. Sitting within our draft transport strategy, and this is an old one now, we've got a new one up and running, but we had a key piece to basically develop a smart roads plan for Hobart, sitting within our theme of managing our traffic and movement network, and you know, leaning heavily on the Victorian and mainland approach, being called smart roads. We started down a path in cooperation with the state to develop this network operations plan, which falls out of the smart roads framework. So if we go to the next slide, please. At about the same time, we were doing a lot of work in our land use planning piece for central Hobart. And of course, like every other city, we come up against these issues of sprawl versus densification and, you know, future uses of city spaces. And this structure plan really guides what we're trying to achieve in, you know, looking for that missing middle, that densification of the city area, along with how we're going to manage through to get to that, you know, that future built state and transport systems that support it. And again, embedding into this the action to complete that sort of first generation transport network operations plan for Inner Hobart, in conjunction with the state government, was one of the key transport pieces for managing the movement networks in the city. Slide, please. So here we go. We've got this interesting trade-off, I think, always in urban spaces around road safety and vehicle efficiency, especially at junctions. And I think what we just heard in the last presentation is this public perception about speed and that you're going to get somewhere quicker. And to be honest, it's Tasmania. You're not going to get anywhere that quickly. And once you get there, you're going to stop and why did you need that extra minute anyway? CBD network operations really are a contested space. We've got everybody all together all the time, all at once. And I think one of those big problems that you always have is, what are the changes to make? What are the ones that are worth pursuing? What makes a real difference to our road safety in these areas? And what else supports the other piece, which is your land use, your movement in place sort of policies, and what else can you do to support growth in these centres? How do you balance all those competing interests? And I suppose, as I mentioned, during COVID, we managed to use that as the trigger or the event to talk about the safety of human life and the sanctity of it, and bring in to play the 40k limits throughout the city and our retail areas across the local government area, with some 30k sections, and we really needed to sort of think about what next. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the NOP, you know, these network operations planning tools, they're really interesting pieces of work, because obviously that contest that exists on every city block at every junction throughout your networks, and it's changing from street to street and block to block as the land use and other things change across your city, requires a fair bit of work. And so we were looking for something that we could use today, that would guide us into the future, that we could do relatively simply, and actually produce a result that was somewhat understandable to the general public. So this is the thing, when you're being pragmatic and not trying to give, well, and you can't give every user the priority they want, there was very much a, we need to provide for each group, but you might not get what you want where you want it in a temporal and a spatial sense, but it will be somewhere in the network. That was a pretty convoluted sentence. Sorry about that. Hopefully you get my meaning. We'll get to that in a second. So if we could slide on. The key features. So we really pared back the data collection. I do think sometimes we get a bit carried away with the data collection and it just obscures what we are really trying to achieve. So you just need to balance that. And that, of course, then simplifies some of your analysis requirements. We could have analysed, 20 years of traffic data in the city and it wouldn't have told us anything more than having a quick look and asking a few people what's going on. We went for a practical application in a very in the starting sense of this document in its initial form, so that we could look at an operational focus and some pretty straightforward level of service descriptors, which gave us additional tools to help our traffic signals operation group. And we looked for sort of more qualitative descriptors rather than specific treatments. So it gave us flexibility to use different tools, different approaches, different solutions in different areas, depending again on what's really going on. And I think the piece in the presentation in Hobart was just the reference there to a great West Australian. Well, I'm pretty sure Tim's sometimes in Western Australia anyway, but Play It Safe. And if you haven't seen this song, it's definitely worth checking out. He did it for the Sydney Opera House 50th anniversary, and the idea that sometimes you've got to go out on a limb a bit is well worthwhile. I don't think it'll play in this version. Anyway, if we can go to the next slide. So what's going on here? We mapped out our strategic objectives for the city, and they go across a whole range of state, national, and local government documentation. What do our road user hierarchies look like? So across our various, transport modes, our bikes, buses, peds, and cars. And we introduced a whole lot of place value mapping to give us an idea of how these things compete against each other at a block level almost. We set up these target levels of service. We came up with the service descriptors, and out of that, we could then look at how the network needed to operate, and that started to try and suggest that we need to give different priority to different user groups on different core routes. So it's pretty straightforward, and it follows that sort of smart roads approach that the Victorians and others have used. And of course, then you get your actions. So here we go. Here's a lovely example. In the core of the city, walking is absolutely, key. And I think that's true of most centres, whether they're urban or rural. You really want to promote as much walking ability around your city and your commercial core as possible. And on the flip side, I suppose, general traffic, we really don't have a level of service that we want to provide in the core for general traffic. So when you put those two things together, you see that we are looking for basically schemes and solutions that advantage pedestrians and don't necessarily advantage motor vehicles moving through the absolute core of the CBD in the city. And most people get that. So here we go. We've got the movement and place piece, which says in the middle of the city. Place is really important. All these pretty clear pieces sit within a very readable document. It's there. There's a link at the end of the presentation. And within that, you can show how these things are aligned to key strategic objectives that sit and are adopted by policymakers and hopefully have the support of the community. So if we go to the next one, how have we used it? So here's a really basic example. We talked about the CBD core. We're looking for pedestrian primacy. We don't really want to promote vehicle use as much. And so we've gone out on a limb a bit, but we've introduced pedestrian-only phase junctions right in the core CBD. So again, one of the big things that we heard from access users, so our wheelchair, our mobility device, our older city users, and other parents and city users, is that turning traffic at junctions really gives them, cause for fear. And I think if you're sitting in a wheelchair trying to cross the street and you're a bit slower than everybody else, or you're my grandma walking across with her walker, you don't feel confident that those people who are propped trying to take the corner have your safety in mind. They just want to get somewhere. So when you go for these pedestrian-only phase junctions, you just turn off the traffic and allow pedestrians to go everywhere. In their fully evolved state, they're often referred to as scramble crossings or these sort of Barnes dance crossings. There's a few physical infrastructure changes you need to make to enable that to happen properly in compliance with various standards, but you can go to a pedestrian-only phase junction straight away. Why would you do it? It's supported in this network operations plan. You're pointing out to people this is about people moving around the city. You go to the next one. How else do you use these things? So again, on some of our bicycle network in the city, we're starting to look at how do we really protect bicycle users at junctions, especially where we've got, moderate turning vehicle movements and we're looking at through movements. So introducing bicycle phase into a junction obviously takes some time out for the motoring public. How you do that in terms of suggesting, well, this is a core route for cyclists, we need to protect them. You can often incorporate these signal phases with improved pedestrian safety so that it operates a little bit like a pedestrian-only phase for a single leg. But in so doing, we've managed to provide better priority for a mode that we're looking to promote, better safety outcomes for both pedestrians and the cyclists, and sending a clear message to road users that you just need to be a little more cautious and look out for other vulnerable road users at these locations. And all this is again borne out when you go back into the network plans of this doesn't happen on every corridor, it doesn't happen in every junction, but you do have some key ones where these intersecting user groups and needs occur. There we go. Why has it worked? Well, we believe it's worked at the moment. These things are only as good as the elected members that continue to read them and support them. But I think one of the big pieces is that, as a city, the city of Hobart's a relatively small study area. So, we're pretty small. We're a relatively agile organisation. We really tried to point out that these pieces of road safety work need to go hand in hand with our other land use and strategic documents. And of course, the road safety benefits become hard to dispute. So it's very important to pick those ones off first and really run with them rather than something that might be seen as a bit easier and esoteric. But, providing for pedestrians in the middle of the city is pretty basic and people sort of get that. So I think really one of the other sort of pieces that we discuss if we've got more time is just when you do these sort of pieces of work, it's really good to have a clear understanding of where you want your policymakers' role. And we find that especially in local government. I think that, it's too easy for policymakers to want to put their fingers into every little operational change. And we certainly don't want them telling us, how much green time at a single set of signals one user group gets over another if we're trying to manage a network. They're harder conversations to have with elected officials, though, I think. Anyway, at the end, we sort of, in the road safety papers, there was this sort of ask that at the end of the presentations, you'd be sort of asking for decent feedback. And so we're always interested in any flaws that people can spot with our approach. You know, and, you know, in the pedestrian only phases, we can see that there is this disbenefit of longer pedestrian waiting and sort of what that means in terms of overall perceptions of safety and people taking greater risks dashing across when there's no traffic in these areas. And I suppose it's one of those things that, you know, everything comes with benefits for some, disbenefits for others. But yes, there's our little prezi. That's the end of that. You can get to the documents through that little URL or the little graphic on the screen. And really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stuart. Kathy, I'm happy if you want to stop screen sharing and we can all come back on screen Brady Bunch style. So we're at the Q&A bit. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. I can see that the Q&A is not working, so I apologize for that. Let me roll back up because there was one at the start for you, Kathy. All right, so the first one I saw is there any possibility of the tool developing the list in order of priority?
Yes, actually it does list in order of priority. So the first list is your top 10, and then there's the additional list at on the second page, if you like. So yep, absolutely. And for sure it is, yes, free to use, free to share, so it can be shared outside Victoria. It's really taken as many activities as we can from Australia-wide and New Zealand, and that's what's been fed into there. So it's certainly not Victorian-centric. So TAC are happy for that to be shared and happy for the feedback to come through, really, so we can continue to refine and make adjustments.
I think that's it for you. David, I saw that you just answered Brett's question, but I'm just going to put it to you because we've got time about, in case other people weren't watching it. How's the work that WA have done, how will that might fit into the regulatory impact statement that's being undertaken by the Federal Department and NTC on reducing the open road default speed limit?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, and you know, I think it's an important thing that that they should include in that regulatory impact statement. And I think, you know, if it's something that could easily be replicated across the nation. It didn't take us a great deal of time to do it here in WA, and I think, you know, a good consultant could get it done pretty quickly. And I think it shows, you know, that not only the lives saved, which is the important bit, but also reduces that fear from the public's perception and from government's perception on making such a change that they know may be unpopular with the population. So I think, yeah, it definitely should be included. In answer to Brett's other question about is it, I think he's hoped that people are aware of it. I'm not sure, but it's something definitely could be chased up.
Awesome. Ed's asking you the same thing I asked when I first saw the presentation too. Where's it up to? What's the next steps? Yeah.
So we're in a state of no government at the moment. We're in got an election coming up, so it's something that wasn't pursued close to an election. It's something that we'll be pursuing with the government once we have a post-election, and hopefully it's something we can get across the line. It's definitely been shared with ministers prior to, but still very close to an election. There was a fear of coming out with a drastic change that close. But I think, you know, first year of government in a new term is the time to make changes such as these.
Excellent. Stuart, one for you. This is from Brett. So he recently saw an article about one of Hobart's councillors demanding evidence that bike lanes don't impact car travel times. You seem to be well equipped to answer this question as per your presentation, so long as you can convince people that digging into the microdata isn't always that helpful.
Yeah, we've got a project on the go down here at the moment to introduce some more cycle lanes into the centre of the city, and sort of complete a main corridor which runs out into one of our main suburb areas. And of course, once you come into the city, it's full of grief. This idea that there's evidence that bike lanes don't impact car travel times was one of those interesting things that, again, people are fixated on speed and car travel times. And we sort of get that. At the same time, it's always curious in the Tasmanian context that people don't draw the conclusion that sitting in traffic at peak hour with everybody else is not about the bike lanes or the signal timings. Might be about the signal timings, but it's about the number of vehicles on the network. And of course, these deeper conversations that you need to have with communities are really difficult. We have pretty much a single, news outlet in this state. The other news outlets are really just publishing press releases and are generally looking for clickbait. It has got to a point, I reckon, in Tasmania where it's almost impossible to have a real discussion and provide evidence to people because people don't want to listen. So yeah, Brett, it's an interesting question. We've totally got data, but I just don't think there's a lot of the population, a lot of the news media that wants to actually work through the extent of the issues and the problems that we face. I don't know if that's a good answer to your question.
You're saying Tasmania sounds exactly the same as South Australia.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yep. Well, that's the end of the question. So I'm going to give you guys the opportunity we'll pass the microphone around once more and you can, final thoughts, I guess, or key learnings for the people that are on the line listening. Kathy, do you want to go first? Any take homes for the team listening?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Mel. No, really.
Go and use the tool.
Yeah. Use the tool and tell us we're a bunch of tools. I don't know, it really, this is for practitioners and for people who are not sure sort of what to do next or where to go next and what options are out there. I think there is just a wealth of information there, and hopefully what we've done is being able to gather it all together and provide it in a way that suits people and delves down to those preferences. So yeah, please use it and please give us feedback, and we'll keep chugging along with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. David, over to you. Final thoughts, take homes.
I think when you've got a problem, you challenge that problem and fear, and I guess present the facts to the ministers. They go on what they hear on the radio, talk back, etc. I guess at the end of the day, a lot of this is just a small minority of people that may be outspoken and present them with the facts and try and find out what their fear is and address it that way.
Great, thank you. Stuart, final words to you.
Oh, look, I'd just like to thank you, Mel, and the LGN crew for putting this together. Like, I was lucky enough to attend the conference down here in Hobart because we're here, and I do think that there's just so much knowledge around Australia in the practitioners that it's really great to have this second opportunity to share something, and it's always time constrained and it's hard to get across just the bulk of everything we do. We're always open for questions and sort of expanding our networks and learning what else is happening in the country, but it's just so great that you're doing this, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Kathy, question for you that's just popped up. Could we have a tool like the Road Mapper for elected officials to learn about road safety?
Yeah, great question. It's one that it's a regular thing we get asked. As an organisation, we do good training for practitioners, and I think that's well established. But yeah, definitely that space of getting some time with elected officials, and then being able to do some very kind of basic level training with them is definitely an area I guess we're moving into more, because that's one of the big barriers for practitioners in being able to implement things. So yeah, that's a great suggestion, and we'll look to make a tool for them as well.
Excellent. Great. Well, I'm going to give you 3 minutes back in your day, everybody. So thank you so much for dialing in. Our next LGN meeting will be the 12th of March, 2 o'clock. It'll be an open mic session, so you'll be able to register and send through your questions, ask a brains trust of members that turn up. If you're not a member, please sign in and turn up. Thank you to our amazing team. Thank you, Kathy, for doing screen sharing today too. Yeah, I will let you have your 3 minutes back. Thank you so much. We will see you at the next event. Bye.